Hello dear friends, how are you? I have come back again with a new video lecture on importance of palynology, and probably this is going to be the last lecture in the palynology series of lectures that were going on. That palynology is a subject which deals with the study of spores and pollen grains in particular. So here we will talk about spores and pollen grains, how they help us in different areas of our life. So the first of all, the pollen grains, they help us, or the spores, their morphological features like the aperture, the exinus sculptures, their shapes, etc., everything that helps us in plant taxonomy. So the first thing is Palynotaxonomy, which you can also refer, that pollen grains, the morphological features of the spores and pollen grains are used as a taxonomic character because they are conserved characters. For example, in case of pteridophyte, if you talk about the Glycanium and the Dicranopteris, both of them belong to Glycaniaceae family, but Glycania has a trilate pollen grain, whereas Dicranopteris has monolith pollen grain. So like this, in Gymnosperm we get, in Cycas we get monosulcate pollen grains. There is no saccate, so it is asaccate, whereas the conifers, the pinus, it is bisaccate, and there are others in conifer members which lack the saccus, like the larix, the suga, the pseudotsuga, like this. And similarly, in angiosperms also there are families which can be identified. There are genera which can simply be identified by the pollen character. And on that basis, in fact, the angiospermic taxon have been divided into two categories, the Stenopalynous taxa and the Eurypalynous taxa. The Stenopalynous taxa are the families which exhibit the pollen character, constant pollen character. So they can, the character of the pollen can become distinguishing feature for that family. For example, the families like Asclepiadaceae, Lamiaceae, Cruciferae or Brassicaceae, Poaceae, these families have spores, pollen grains rather, have pollen grains with distinctive feature, so they can be identified. The pollen grain character is constant for these families. So these families are Stenopalynous families. Similarly, the Eurypalynous taxon, they have a variable character of the pollen grains. The morphological features of the pollen grains are heterogeneous in case of Eurypalynous members. For example, that of Acanthaceae, Verbinaceae, Rubiaceae, Astoraceae, these families, they exhibit a variable character of their pollen grains. So the pollen grain features cannot become the distinctive feature of the families. So this is how the pollen character can be a character of a genus or species or families. Now, talking about the other importance of palynology, like the palynology is used in petroleum exploration. You can also call it geopalynology. One aspect of it is petroleum exploration. The other aspect is stratigraphic correlations. Both of them are associated with geopalynology. How? Because, as you know, the pollen grains and spores are very, very resistant bodies because of the sporopollenin that is present in their wall. And so they are preserved as a fossil record since a long time. So they are present, a specific type of pollen grain is present in a specific stratum in the earth crust. So it may become a index fossil. Maybe an assemblage of these microfossils may serve as a index fossil and can be used for stratigraphic correlation, biozonation or stratigraphic correlation. That means what is the age of that stratum can be determined with the help of the pollen grain. This is what stratigraphy is. And also petroleum exploration, that are you going to find petroleum in a particular place or not, can also be determined with the help of the pollen studies, the fossil pollen microfossils, study of the microfossils. If you find certain type of pollen grains, the abundance of those pollen grains, they indicate that there is a chance of finding petroleum if you drill further, or you have to stop now. So this is what is geopalynology is. Now coming to another importance, that is aeropalynology. Pollen grains and spores are, for some people, they are allergic. So they serve as aeroallergens. So this is a branch which is very significant. There are many plants in which you will find that people are having allergic responses like asthmatic symptoms they develop. Some people develop migraine in presence of some certain plants. So this kind of study, in this study what is done, you have to have a air sampler with the help of which you can sample the airs, the spores and pollen grains that are floating in the air. And there are slides inside you can put slides inside the sampler, and those slides will have glue on the surface, and the pollen grain spores, whatever is present in the air, will get stuck to the slide, and then you can follow it, and you can study it under the microscope in your lab. So this is aeropalynology. And in another study, allergic study, you can inject the extracts of the pollen grains in sensitive humans, and you can study is there any response to that antigen or not. They are generally injected in the hand to see any type of rash develops there or not. So this is the part of aeropalynology, or aerobiology, you can say, or aeroallergen studies. The next thing the palynology can be exploited is in forensic science. Forensic science is a science that deals with finding criminals, doing research how the particular crime was accomplished. So pollen grains and spores, they might help to analyze, to investigate the crime situation, the location of the crime. Say somebody has been killed at certain place under certain tree, and he or she has been dropped at certain other place. That place does not have that kind of plants. So if you find in his or her body while doing post-mortem studies, then if you find certain kind of spore or pollen grain in his body, maybe in his stomach or in his stool or in his feet or anywhere, then from that you can refer that the person has been killed somewhere else. And where does this plant grow? If you try to find those plants, possibly you might end up with the exact location, and that means the pollen grains might serve as clue for forensic investigation. People might be killed by feeding some poisonous plant. So in that case also you might find some pollen grains in his stomach or stool, etc. Now the next major thing in which palynology is very much useful is the Melissopalynology or Melissopalynology. This is a branch which studies the presence of pollen grains in honey. Yeah, honey is collected by the bees and the insects, the nectars that are collected from the flower. During that time, they also collect some pollen grains mixed with the nectar or on the bodies of the bees. So when the nectar is brought to the beehive and it is converted into honey, the pollen grains remain within it. So further, if you study the honey under the microscope, you might find different kinds of pollen grains within that. And you can also characterize the quality of the honey on that basis. If the honey contains pollens of different plants, more than 50% of the pollens belong to a single plant only. If it is like that, if the frequency of pollen grains of a particular plant is 50%, then this kind of honey will be called unifloral honey. And if it is more than, the number of plants, number of pollen grains, types of pollen grains are very much diverse in a particular honey, then that kind of honey will be called multifloral honey. So this is how pollen grains are useful in Melissopalynology in determining the quality of the honey also. Lemon juice, lemon and honey. So palynology is, Melissopalynology is there in the morning. So two new things have been incorporated recently with respect to the pollens. These are, one is the nutraceutical in significance, that pollens are being used as a very nutritive substance by the nutraceutical industry. They sell bee pollen. The pollens stick to the bodies of the bees, are collected, and those are said to be the very nutritious, healthy substance. So in nutraceutical it has got importance. In medicine, in the last video I talked about how pollen grain can be used to deliver drugs. The pollen grains are very simple structures. If you destroy the inner protoplast, the membrane, what remains is the exinus wall with different kinds of apertures. So if these walls, this can be considered as microcapsules, and they can be filled up with different types of drugs. These drugs will be released in the body in a very minute quantity, which is very significant in certain diseases, that the drug will be released slowly and it will remain for a long time. So for that purpose, pollen grain can be a very good delivery system. So it can serve as a drug delivery tool also. So these were some significance of palynology, you can say, why we study pollen grains and spores. So these are the importance of pollen grains and spores. I think you will be benefited with this lecture. This will be useful for graduate students, masters also. So thank you very much for associating with me and remaining with me. I will continue to bring new videos later on various aspects of botany, biochemistry, microbiology, molecular biology. My specialization is microbiology, and I worked for quite a long time in molecular biology. I still work in microbiology, particularly the soil microbiology, but my master's is in botany. I had been a gold medalist, so I will also discuss botany maybe from next few classes. I think I should switch to botany for some time, and then I will come back in microbiology and other subjects. So hope you will like this video, and I will request you to increase the subscription, because it takes time, it takes energy for making this kind of videos. So if you want to see your friends to see these kind of videos, your brothers, your sisters, so you should advertise, you should share it to your friends and videos and colleagues, so that they can be benefited with these lectures. I know there are other lectures also, other videos also. They're good videos, you should also watch them. So by watching 2-3 different videos, one can come to a conclusion, one can write a note, beautiful note, with enriched information. So these videos are quite useful these days for study. Now I should end here. Thank you very much for watching.